All right, y'all, let's talk about child support in Texas. So here in front of me is straight out of the Texas Family Code. This is the child support guideline chart, all right? This is heartbreaking for some people. It's invigorating for others. I guess it depends on which side of the give and take you're going to be on. Texas calculates child support in one of the most unfair and terrible ways I can think of. So if you're a legislator or a judge or somebody and you're watching this video, do your part to get Texas child support changed. This is garbage. Now, all right, for all the rest of us, Texas only considers the non-custodial parent their income when we calculate child support. Many other states, they look at, how much money do both parents make? What's the percentage of parenting time? What's the cost of the insurance? And all these other factors. And then they calculate child support at the bottom. Texas doesn't do that. In Texas, if you're the non-custodial parent, that is, you lost the custody fight, ta-da, you're paying child support, right? That's how the code works. And it doesn't matter if the other spouse makes more money than you. None of that matters. It doesn't matter if you think they need it. It does not matter. It doesn't matter if you think, well, she just uses it to get her hair and nails done. None of that matters, all right? So it's a heartbreaking thing, but here it is. They look at your income, your top line income. When you get your check stub, that upper left hand that says, this is how much you made this month. That's how they put that on one column. Then they subtract taxes out and they spit out a number on the other side that says this is your net monthly resources. And then they multiply that number by 20% for the first kid and 5% for each additional kid, assuming the same mother. Okay, so you got two kids, you're paying 25% of your net monthly resources. Now, this number, I want to point out to you, the net monthly resources does not necessarily match what's on your check stub. Your check stub may take out for your retirement and they take out for, thrift savings plan, or they take out for whatever else. None of that matters to the Texas child support. All they care about is your federal taxes, your Social Security tax, your Medicare tax. After that, nothing else counts. So you take your gross monthly income, you put it into the calculator, and it shows you your net, and then you calculate for the children by multiplying by a percentage. Now, here's something else that's unfair about the Texas Family Code guideline for child support is when you make over about $12,500 a month, you have maxed out how much child support you're going to pay. Okay. So in other words, if you make $15,000 a month, if you make $20,000 a month, you're only paying child support as if you made $12,250. So the wealthier you are, the smaller the percentage of your income you actually pay in child support. So the legislators, in their ultimate wisdom, have created an environment where the wealthy pay a smaller percentage of child support than people who are more poor, right? So I'm not trying to start a class war, but I am saying there's some shit here that needs to be addressed, all right? Now, here's the bad part. If you make the minimum wage, which minimum wage is still $7.25, no one actually makes that small of money anymore. I mean, you flip burgers for $15 an hour around here, right? But minimum wage, or say even if you make $3,000 a month, if you bring home $3,000 a month, you're paying 20% for one child of $2,500. That does not leave you much money to live on. Okay, so the less money you make, the harder it is to live on what's left after child support. 20% is a lot more impactful the lower you are on the chart. Okay, so a lot of parents who are going to have to pay child support, they try to find some way to wiggle out of it. They try to find some way, well, I can't afford my rent if I pay child support. The court seriously does not care about that. The court will say, I'm sorry, nothing says you have to have a new car. You trade that car in and get a smaller car. Okay. You need to move into a smaller apartment. You have a duty to support your children. You do not have a duty to contribute to your retirement plan. So if you can't make child support, you got to start cutting expenses, and that could mean cutting retirement. That means moving into a smaller apartment, and all of those things, of course, have a negative impact on your child long term. But the court doesn't care about that, right? The court doesn't care that you're moving into a smaller apartment, and therefore the kids, now you got 3 kids living in 1 bedroom. The court doesn't care about that. They care about this. Now there's federal law that talks about this. That's a video for another day. The 4D system is just terrible, and I think it's terribly unjust, but I don't make the law. But understand that child support in Texas is a multi-billion-dollar moneymaker for the state, and they're never going to change it if they can help it. Okay, so talk to your elected officials about changing child support. But child support's rough, but this is how we calculate it. It doesn't care. The court doesn't care if mama does spend that money on her hair and her nails. Court does not care. She gets a new car, court does not care. You pay your child support, all right? What happens if you don't pay? This is as close to a debtor's prison as we have, y'all. If you don't pay your child support, the court will throw you in jail over unpaid child support, okay? You don't pay your Discover card, dings your credit. You don't pay your child support, you land in jail, all right? So child support is what it is, and if you are a parent who needs this money to help support the kids, then there it is. It's good for you. If you're a parent trying to pay it, it's not necessarily good for you, but it is what it is, okay? So if you've got child support, it's going to be a problem for you. You want to mitigate your damage, or you want to maximize the benefit, you for sure need a lawyer, because the courts are just going to follow these guidelines. Modifying child support, there are some times where you can, and there are some times where you should. And then I want to give you a pro tip at the end of this video. So if you are the obligor, you're the one who's paying child support. If you lose your job, or your job lays you off, or somehow you get demoted or something like that, you lose your income, my strong recommendation is to get into court and modify your child support as fast as you can, okay? Coming to mind is oil field guys, right? So when money's flowing in the oil field, you're making big money and you're paying mama, $1,000 a month or $2,000 a month in child support. When business slows down and the oil field is not cranking out money and you're basically laid off, it doesn't take very long. In 2 or 3 months, you're thousands of dollars behind on child support, okay? This is where you start getting in trouble and you start running the risk of going to jail, right? So if you are assessed child support at a certain income level and you lose that job, or you get laid off and your income goes down, my strong recommendation is to get in the court as fast as you can to get your child support lowered to match your income, okay? You need to hire a lawyer for that. So I know you're going to be paying thousands to hire your lawyer to fight that out, but it'll be worth it. It'll probably pay for itself in, 10 months or a year. It'll probably pay for itself in the savings on the child support. So don't get lost in the cost of the lawyer. You got to think long term. So my strong recommendation is if your income goes down, you need to get your child support lowered down too. Now, you can't lower your income in an attempt to sandbag your child support. So if you're capable of earning $60,000, $70,000 a year in a certain job, you can't quit that job and then go to work changing tires or flipping burgers so that you can pay less child support, right? The court will look at that and say you are voluntarily unemployed or underemployed. And so they could still assess you at the full amount that you're capable of making, even though you're making much less, because you voluntarily left your good paying job for something less, and the court will see that as sandbagging, and they will turn around and make you pay the full amount of child support, okay? But if your income legit goes down, you need to come back in and modify it before you get real behind on your payments. Now, here's an interesting thing that happens. What happens if you stop paying your child support? You lose your oil field job or something and you stop paying child support because you're unemployed. the obligee, the person who receives that child support, she can call down to the Attorney General's office and say, hey, he stopped paying. And sooner or later, the Attorney General will get involved and they'll start looking at why you're not paying, and they'll file a court case to figure out why you're not paying and try to make sure that you do pay. And none of that costs mama anything. If you lose your job and you call the Attorney General and say, hey, I lost my job, I can no longer pay this much child support, I need to have my child support lowered, they should come help you because they represent the state. You're a citizen of the state too. They should come and help you, but they don't, because they have no incentive to help you lower your child support. So if you lost your job or you lost your income and you need to lower your child support, you need to do it fast, and you have to hire your own lawyer to do it, because the Attorney General's office, they should help you, and technically they do, but they never actually will. Okay, you can't count on it. I guess I should say they do sometimes do that, but you can't count on it. Okay, so it's just how it is. The state makes 66 cents on the dollar from the feds for every dollar of child support they collect from parents. Okay, so if the state collects child support from you, they're also bringing over 60 cents on the dollar from the feds. So the state has no incentive to lower your child support. Okay, so you think that's corrupt? I think it probably is. You need to look at Title 4D and talk to your congressmen and your senators about changing the Texas state law about child support. And really, it's a federal thing, so it gets big. But the state has an absolute vested interest in collecting child support, so they've got no sympathy for you if you lose your job. Okay, so I know that's a lot of people don't realize the state makes money off of collecting child support. That's why they have a child support division in the Attorney General's office. They don't have a custody division. They don't have a best interest of the child division, but they damn sure have a child support division, because the state makes billions of dollars from the feds, which is also our tax dollars. But the state makes bazillions of dollars from the feds for collecting child support. So if you lost your job, you need to modify your child support. The state won't do it for you. What happens if you are the obligee parent, you're the one receiving child support, and you know the other parent has moved up in their career, they're making more money, they've moved into another job, or they've been promoted and they're making more money? You can also take them back to court to get a modification of child support to bump the child support up to match their current income. So what does that look like? It's easier in this circumstance to call the Attorney General's office and see if they will do it. Now, the Attorney General's office very often will file a modification like that if they find out the other parent is making more money. They're not fast about it. They're not going to do it today. They're going to do it weeks or months from now, but they will eventually do it, and it doesn't really cost you much money. Now, they don't represent you. They represent the state, but they're kind of in alignment with you. So if they're going after the other parent for more child support, I would still recommend you hire your own lawyer so that they can, so that your lawyer can help make sure that we're getting all the information about the other parent's income. Okay, the state is only going to do so much work in that case, so they don't work for you; they work for the state, but they will help you in the most basic way, and they will typically help bump that child support up to match the other parent's income. Now, when can you do that? You can do a review every 3 years. So if it's been 3 years since your last order, you can file to do a review, either with a private lawyer or with the Attorney General's office. If you know the other parent has received like a promotion, or they're on social media showing off their new boat and showing their new car and their new big house, and you have to know they're making more money, right? You can file a modification if you feel like they are making more money. And there's a little formula that we look at. If we determine that they're making enough money to change your child support by 20% or $100, whichever is less, then it's ripe to go back and do a modification. Now, we like to help people with a cost benefit analysis. If your child support's only going to go up $100, but it's going to cost you $5,000 in legal fees to go after an extra $100 a month, that doesn't really pay for itself. But if your child support is going to go up several $100s a month, right, then it could, or $1,000 a month, something like that, then obviously this case makes sense. So there is some cost benefit analysis that goes into whether to modify child support or not. All right, let me give you a warning about modifying child support up. Here's something you just need to be aware of. It happens over and over and over. I can see it coming, a mile out. But say it's been 6 or 8 years since you modified child support. So you get divorced and the other parent's paying you $300 a month in child support, and you go for 6, 8, 10, 11 years, and you've never taken them back to court. They're still paying you the $300 of child support. When you file a new case, that other parent is going to get pissed off. Now, you and I know that you could have taken them back every 3 years. They should be paying a lot more child support right now than they currently are. They should have been paying more child support this whole time. Every few years, you could have taken them back. So, in reality, they're not getting screwed now. They just got lucky all those other years. But they're not going to see it that way, okay? So what's going to happen is you let them slide for 3 or 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 years, and then you want to take them back to file child support. They're going to be pissed off about it, and you're going to say, well, I've been letting you go this whole time, but now the kids are bigger and they're into sports, and I need the extra money to help do these things with these kids. The other parent's going to still be pissed off about it, all right? So don't think that you're doing them a favor by letting them slide all these years, right? Don't think they're going to see that as how nice you are, how magnanimous you are for letting them slide all these years. They're still going to be pissed off about it, okay? But it is what it is. Notice one last thing. We don't call it parent support. It's child support. So consider the times that you have to tell your kids no about things because you just don't have the money to do it. If you haven't taken the other parent back to modify their child support every 3 years like you should, if the other parent is making more money now and they're not paying any additional child support, you are telling your kids no because you can't afford things, because you don't want the conflict with the other parent. You don't want to argue about child support with the other parent. That's what that is, okay? So you're not doing that other parent a favor because they don't see that as a favor. They just see it as you kind of being a pushover, right? They see it as they've kind of got the upper hand and you basically have been too scared to take them back to court, right? That's how they're going to see it. And now when you actually take them back to court, they're going to be pissed off about it. But in the meantime, you've gone for years and years without the money in your household that would have been there to support those kids. So I'm just saying, if it's time to modify this child support, it's time to modify the child support, and the other parent is not going to see it as you doing them a favor if you delay taking them back, okay? So I'm not saying you have to take them back every 3 years like clockwork. In another video I've talked about, let's not litigate any more than we have to. But ultimately, if you do need the money and the parent has it to help, it might be worth taking them back on the case because the kids need what they need. All right. So child support modification, yes, it can be done. If you owe money, if you owe a certain amount and you can't afford to pay it, you need to get it lowered. That's a good case. That's a good reason to modify down. If you're the person receiving child support, it may be time to modify up if the other parent's making more money or if it's been enough time. But modifications happen all the time. That's just part of the child raising thing. And when the kids age out, child support goes away, and then it's over. But as long as these kids are still minors, and child support is just as important today as it was from the beginning all the way until they age out. Child support enforcements are one of the most technically demanding pieces of the whole family law gig as an attorney. They're also child support enforcements are basically as close to a debtor's prison as we have in this country. If you don't pay your Discover card, you're not going to jail for that. If you don't pay your mortgage, you're not going to jail for that. If you don't pay your child support, you could go to jail for that. Okay. So paying child support is important. Now, there's a big debate about whether, we should be sending people to jail over unpaid child support or not. Certainly, if you spend 6 months in jail, whatever job you had is not going to be there for you when you get out. You lose your job in jail, you lose your apartment while you're in jail or your house because you haven't been making payments on that while you've been in jail. I mean, it's going to have long-term negative consequences for you if you go to jail over unpaid child support. So the thing to do with child support, if you don't like it, is to try to modify it. But skipping out on paying it is not how you fix it. Okay. You're not going to punish the other parent, certainly not in the long term, by not paying your child support. Okay. That's not how you do it. If you don't like it, you need to hire a lawyer to try to modify it and try to mitigate the damage it's doing to you financially. But just not paying it is not the answer. Now, if you're the obligee parent, you're the one who's being paid child support, and the other parent is not paying, the first time they miss a month, we don't start a case, right? As always, try to give grace, be as good of a co-parent as you can be. But if they show a pattern over time of being unwilling or unable to pay child support, then it's time to file an enforcement. And what that means is we're going to document how many times they missed payments and how much they owe, and we're going to ask the court to enforce the court's order. Now, keep in mind, it's not your and my order. It's not the lawyer's order. It's not you as the client's order. It's the court's order. The court ordered him or her to pay child support. If the parent doesn't pay, then they're violating the court's order. So it's up to the court to assess an appropriate punishment. Now, some of those punishments could be jail, could also be kind of a probation thing we call community supervision to make sure that they pay their child support. It could be ordering them to get a job. The family code allows the court to order people to make reasonable efforts to get employment. It could be a jobs program, helping people actually find work through a choices program like we have here in Tarrant County. So there's lots of options. It's not all necessarily jail time, but unpaid child support does accrue interest at 6%. So unpaid child support will continue to grow. Each month you miss is unpaid child support, and then all that draws interest, and so it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. How does that work in the long term? Imagine the child turns 18 and graduates high school, and you still owe $20,000 of unpaid child support. Well, your child support obligation just keeps going. So the child is aged out, and your child support still keeps drafting out of your paycheck. Or when you get your tax return, the Attorney General seizes it and applies it to your arrears. So child support is a duty. It's not a debt. You cannot discharge child support in a bankruptcy. Okay, so you can discharge all your credit cards. You cannot discharge a child support because it's not a debt. I'll give you one example. I had a gentleman come in, older guy in his 80s. He had the nose thing, with the tube with the oxygen and little cart with the oxygen tank. He had been divorced way back in the early 80s, and he left the state and never paid his child support. At the time he came into me a few years ago, he had over $100,000 of child support arrears. His only income was his Social Security check that was coming in was $747 a month. The government was seizing half of that each month to pay toward his child support arrears. And there's not a thing we could do about it because he didn't have any other income. His only income came from the feds, and the Attorney General was taking 50% of that to apply to his $100,000 of unpaid child support. He's going to pay child support until he dies. And then you know what happens? The state comes after your remainder from your estate. Child support never leaves. You can't even escape it if you die if you've got arrears, right? The state can come after it from your estate. So, as I said, the state makes money on collecting child support. So they don't like to give it away. All right. So child support enforcements, they're super serious. They're quasi-criminal, so they're very technically demanding from the lawyer side. Do not try to do an enforcement on your own, okay? Because it's technical, it's quasi-criminal, double jeopardy attaches. So if you screw it up, you just missed it. You missed your one chance, okay? So it's really technical. If you want to enforce child support, you need a lawyer.